Welcome to the Student Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Charon. In this episode, I sat down and interviewed my head of upper school, Mr. Ryan. We discussed Mr. Ryan's football career as he played in high school, at the University of Pennsylvania, and had one training camp with the Detroit Lions. We talked about his decision-making on where he would attend college to play football, as well as some of his best high school football memories. Hope you enjoyed the interview. Let's get right to it.
Hey, Mr. Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing well, Sam. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
I got some good questions. I want to welcome you to Shipley community and just get you on here.
Thank you. Excited to participate.
So first, before we get into everything, are you enjoying your time at Shipley so far?
I am. It's really been an excellent transition. Getting to know folks now and students like yourself and faculty and other admin. It's been really good. I feel very welcomed. I feel at home. So
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. We're happy to have you here too. We really like it. I personally, I'm very excited. And I really like what you're doing.
Awesome.
So if we're just gonna jump right into it, so you're a football player. You played at Penn.
Yes.
You had a cup of coffee with the Detroit Lions.
Yep.
And now if I could just like a basic question, but when did you start playing football, and was it something you realized right away that this is something I want to do in college or as long as I can?
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh area, and football is huge in that part of the country. So, I grew up playing football very early. I mean, I was on we called them Pee Wee teams back in the day. So I'd say I was 7 years old the first time I wore pads and went out there, 7 and 8. But we played in the neighborhood all the time. We played tackle football all the time. And it didn't matter what the surface was.
Right.
We would play tackle football on an abandoned lot, on grass, on the cobblestone street. It didn't matter. And there were a lot of really, really good athletes and tough physical people. And that was where I learned how to be a good football player and that kind of challenge and that upbringing.
Yeah.
So and just for the second part of the question, it was, being from where I was from, and there were only a few ways kind of like that were put before you as ways out of that kind of place. And one was being an athlete. And so a lot of young people, especially a lot of Black and brown young people in that area had aspirations. I had a good friend of mine who also ended up playing for actually the Pittsburgh Steelers at one point. So yeah.
Yeah, like you were saying, there's tons of players just from your area where, multiple in the NFL right now, but multiple Hall of Famers on a list of just 10 players I have here, like Tony Dorsett, Joe Montana, Aaron Donald's in the NFL now, but he'll be a Hall of Famer. Darrelle Revis, one of the best cornerbacks of all time.
That's right.
Ty Law. So, that just to name a few.
Yeah.
That's just from where
That's great. You've done your research, and I love it.
And then, so, like you said, being from Pittsburgh, high school football is huge. What was that like under the Friday night lights, like competing? I'm sure it was pretty packed sometimes.
Yeah. For me, I was in high school. I was at a pretty small high school. But Friday night games were always packed. Didn't really matter the level of competition. And it was always exciting to be able to play in that kind of under that kind of venue. And then, the way that high school playoffs worked, if you made it far enough, you got to play in what was at the time Three River Stadium, which is now Heinz Field, or was torn down, and they built Heinz Field in the same spot. So you could be playing in front of a large number of people in pretty intense circumstances, and I have a lot of really positive memories from that time. I owe a lot of who I am today to that time of growing into a young man playing that sport. There were some good things about that. There were some not so great things about that, but I really value that experience for sure.
And that just kind of leads me into my next question, which is might be a simple one, might not be. What was your favorite high school football memory?
Oh wow, okay. All right, there are two I have in mind, but we only have time for one. So my senior year was actually a really tough year, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about recruiting. One of the things that happened was, I was a highly recruited player. The running back who had graduated the year before me, ended up going to Pitt, and I got a lot of exposure that way. But then going into my senior year, I experienced a number of injuries. And what was really a blessing is I didn't have to miss any games, but and not a lot of people know this, I only practiced maybe a combined 2 weeks the whole season because I was just injured all the time. But I would always play in the game. So there was one particular circumstance where we were playing against a team. They weren't a great team. They were okay. I think we were, people thought we would win. But I had the week before I had sprained my knee, and I hadn't practiced at all that week. But I dressed for the game because I was, it was a small school, so like if I didn't play, we would probably, be in trouble. And this was the day where, prior to, today, I think folks are very careful, especially around concussions and major injuries. Like, that it wasn't the case then. So my coaches wanted me to play, and I wanted to play. So I went into warmups, and I felt like I could barely jog around. Like I didn't know how it would work, but I was like, I'll try it. And after the first quarter, I had kind of loosened up a little bit, whatever, and I ended up having a ridiculous game. I mean, by the end of the game, I had 326 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns, and I could barely walk around before the game started. So that for me is a very special memory of like, how resilient the human body is, and how powerful that adrenaline, rush can be. And we're able to accomplish quite a bit more than we think we can.
I understand what you're talking about with the concussion as well, as far as like being a hockey player. People are much more careful about that now than like even 5 or 6 years ago they were. And I mean, I don't want to take too much of your time, but so you played at college at University of Pennsylvania.
That's right. Great
school, obviously, and a historic program, playing Franklin Field. Historic
stadium.
Sure. What influenced your decision to commit there, and what maybe some other options that you had?
Sure.
Was it a clear-cut decision that Penn was it?
Right. That's a great question, and this ties into the comment I made earlier. So I was fairly well. When I say highly recruited, so I was being recruited by some of the mid-major programs, Division I. So University of Cincinnati, University of Toledo, Akron, some of those. Some Midwestern schools.
Cincinnati's doing great.
Right. So I mean, again, all of these places, they have legit programs, but they're not like the Notre Dames and the Florida States and things like that. Although Florida State's not as good anymore. I'm dating myself a little bit, but you get the point. I was recruited for a while by Penn State as well, but what ended up happening was, I had all those injuries. And I think that hurt my film. I mean, I still had a pretty good season, but it wasn't as good as it was going to be. And so a lot of those schools kind of dropped out, with the exception of University of Cincinnati. So when I was at the point of making a decision, I had kind of University of Cincinnati as my one kind of Division I program that was still in the mix, and then, or 1A program. Now it's I'm getting old, bro. Now it's FCS and FBS or whatever. It used to be 1A and 1AA. So that was the 1A program that was still there. And then there were a number of Patriot League teams, which is like Lehigh, Lafayette, some of those schools that were heavy in the mix. And then the Ivy League. So Princeton, Harvard, and Penn were in the mix. By the end of that process, it had been narrowed down to Cincinnati, Lehigh, Harvard, and Penn. And then I went through the process. Cincinnati wasn't sure if they were going to offer me a scholarship or not. And then my visit to Penn really sealed it for me, because there was something about the urban setting, being in close proximity to the city, having the athletic tradition that Penn had, and the great academic program, and it was relatively close to home, so it was across the state rather than in Boston or wherever else we would have ended up. So that's how I ended up at Penn.
And then really my last section of this, just like the last 2 questions, is so you coached you were a head coach after college and being a running back. And I mean, it's not everyone's cut out for coaching, but was coaching something you always knew you wanted to get into after school? Like, were you? Some people just play the game and are just great at it, but you seem like someone that really understood the game too. Was that like something you knew you wanted to do after, or was that maybe a coach was like, you should give this a thought?
Yeah, that's another great question. So when I first realized that I enjoyed the strategic element of football, I was in high school, and I would carry around with me notebooks. And in those notebooks, I would just like dream up plays. So I would have notebooks full of football plays. And it wouldn't even be things that we were running. Like, it's not like I was just copying down our offense or whatever, but I would be thinking of them. And I really enjoyed the strategic element of that. And then I would say partnered with that. I was team captain at Penn twice, so my junior and my senior year. And it became clear through those times that I had a calling to leadership, and kind of putting those things together, the leadership kind of people focused part and the strategic part seemed to be a great fit. So as I was thinking about what my career would be, I thought it would be a good idea to try teaching. Once I was done in Detroit, I would try teaching and coaching. I actually that's when I joined Episcopal Academy, and I was there as an assistant coach and teaching. And then eventually, when I left EA, I went to the Stony Brook School and became the head football coach. And it was a great time. I don't know if I want to go back into coaching.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. I've spent about 15 to 20 years of my career as a coach, and I really enjoyed it. It was very rewarding the way I got to build into young people's lives, and but I think I'm ready to be doing something else.
And then just really my last question to finish it up. So you played at Penn, obviously we were just talking about that, and another member of your team, Jeff Hatch, who was on the I did some research on the offensive line. So do you contribute? I mean, obviously you're a great running back and you have the rushing title, but for your school, but do you contribute a lot of that success to a guy like him who was a third-round draft pick?
Sure.
Which especially, you don't always see the highest draft picks coming out of like an Ivy League school, but he was a third round, pretty good.
Yes. Yeah, he was excellent. I mean, and that's the reality of team sports, right? Is that no matter how many accolades a particular person gets, there's always a whole team of people, both literally in the sense of like who you're playing with, but also like coaches, mentors, strength coaches, right? Who are dedicating their time and energy into making you the best that you can be. I can't claim like any kind of greatness apart from my teammates. Jeff being one of the better ones. But it wasn't just Jeff. I mean, there were tons of folks on those teams. We had pretty good teams. I mean,
you won the Ivy League.
My graduating class, we had the all-time leading passer, the all-time leading receiver, all-time leading rusher. We had 2 Ivy League championships. It should have been 3. We had some good teams. So it is no individual performer is so good that they just transcend all of the people that help them and worked with them.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Good.
Thank you for your time, man.
Oh, it's my
pleasure. I really
pleasure.
enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
I learned a lot. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.